Brought to you by WikiVD Documentaries. Switzerland. Switzerland, officially the Swiss Confederation, is a federal republic in Europe. It consists of 26 cantons, and the city of Bern is the seat of the federal authorities. The country is situated in western Central Europe, and is bordered by Italy to the south, France to the west, Germany to the north, and Austria and Liechtenstein to the east. Switzerland is a landlocked country geographically divided between the Alps, the Swiss Plateau, and the Jura, spanning an area of. While the Alps occupy the greater part of the territory, the Swiss population of approximately 8 million people is concentrated mostly on the plateau, where the largest cities are to be found. Among them are the two global cities and economic centers Zürich and Geneva. The establishment of the old Swiss Confederacy dates to the late medieval period, resulting from a series of military successes against Austria and Burgundy. Swiss independence from the Holy Roman Empire was formally recognized in the Peace of Westphalia in 1648. The country has a history of armed neutrality going back to the Reformation. It has not been in a state of war internationally since 1815, and did not join the United Nations until 2002. Nevertheless, it pursues an active foreign policy, and is frequently involved in peace-building processes around the world. In addition to being the birthplace of the Red Cross, Switzerland is home to numerous international organizations, including the second-largest UN office. On the European level, it is a founding member of the European Free Trade Association, but notably not part of the European Union or the European Economic Area. However, it participates in the Schengen area and the European single market through bilateral treaties spanning the intersection of Germanic and Romance Europe. Switzerland comprises four main linguistic and cultural regions: German, French, Italian, and Romansh. Although the majority of the population are German-speaking, Swiss national identity is rooted in a common historical background, shared values such as federalism and direct democracy, and Alpine symbolism. Due to its linguistic diversity, Switzerland is known by a variety of native names: Schweiz, Suisse, Svizzera, and Svizzera, or, on coins and stamps, Latin is used instead of the four living languages. Switzerland is one of the most developed countries in the world, with the highest nominal wealth per adult, and the 8th highest per capita gross domestic product according to the IMF. Switzerland ranks at or near the top globally in several metrics of national performance, including government transparency, civil liberties, quality of life, economic competitiveness, and human development. Zurich and Geneva have each been ranked among the top cities in the world in terms of quality of life, with the former ranked second globally, according to Mercer. Etymology. The English name Switzerland is a compound containing Switzer, an obsolete term for the Swiss, which was in use during the 16th to 19th centuries. The English adjective Swiss is a loan from French, also in use since the 16th century. The name Switzer is from the Alemannic, in origin an inhabitant of Schwyz and its associated territory, one of the walled Staaten cantons which formed the nucleus of the old Swiss Confederacy. The Swiss began to adopt the name for themselves after the Swabian War of 1499. Used alongside the term for Confederates, Genossen, used since the 14th century. The data code for Switzerland, CH, is derived from Latin Confederatio Helvetica. The toponym Schwyz itself was first attested in 972, as Old High German. ultimately perhaps related to Bern, referring to the area of forest that was burned and cleared to build. The name was extended to the area dominated by the canton, and after the Swabian War of 1499 gradually came to be used for the entire Confederation. The Swiss-German name of the country is homophonous to that of the canton and the settlement, but distinguished by the use of the definite article. The Latin name Confederatio Helvetica was neologized and introduced gradually after the formation of the federal state in 1848, harking back to the Napoleonic Helvetic Republic, appearing on coins from 1879. Inscribed on the Federal Palace in 1902 and after 1948 used in the official seal. Helvetica is derived from the Helvetii, a Gaulish tribe living on the Swiss plateau before the Roman era. Helvetia appears as a national personification of the Swiss Confederacy in the 17th century, with a 1672 play by Johann Caspar Weissenbach. Early history. The oldest traces of hominid existence in Switzerland date back about 150,000 years. The oldest known farming settlements in Switzerland, which were found at Gaschlingen, have been dated to around 5300 BC. The earliest known cultural tribes of the area were members of the Hallstatt and Latin cultures, named after the archaeological site of Latin on the north side of Lake Neuchâtel. Latin culture developed and flourished during the Late Iron Age from around 450 BC, possibly under some influence from the Greek and Etruscan civilizations. One of the most important tribal groups in the Swiss region was the Helvetii. Steadily harassed by the Germanic tribes, in 58 BC the Helvetii decided to abandon the Swiss plateau and migrate to Western Gallia, but Julius Caesar's armies pursued and defeated them at the Battle of Bibracte, in today's eastern France, forcing the tribe to move back to its original homeland. In 15 BC, Tiberius, who was destined to be the second Roman emperor, and his brother, Drusus, conquered the Alps, integrating them into the Roman Empire. The area occupied by the Helvetii, the namesakes of the later Confederatio Helvetica, first became part of Rome's Gallia Belgica province and then of its Germania Superior province, while the eastern portion of modern Switzerland was integrated into the Roman province of Raetia. Sometime around the start of the Common Era, the Romans maintained a large legionary camp called Vindonissa, now a ruin, at the confluence of the Aare and Reuss rivers, near the town of Windisch, an outskirt of Brugg. The 1st and 2nd century AD were an age of prosperity for the population living on the Swiss plateau. Several towns, like Aventicum, Lulia Equestris, and Augusta Raurica, reached a remarkable size, while hundreds of agricultural estates were founded in the countryside. Around 260 AD, the fall of the Agri-Decemates territory north of the Rhine transformed today's Switzerland into a frontier land of the empire. Repeated raids by the Alemanni tribes provoked the ruin of the Roman towns and economy, forcing the population to find shelter near Roman fortresses, like the Castrum Rauricense near Augusta Raurica. The empire built another line of defense at the north border, but at the end of the 4th century the increased Germanic pressure forced the Romans to abandon the linear defense concept, and the Swiss plateau was finally open to the settlement of Germanic tribes. In the early Middle Ages, from the end of the 4th century, the western extent of modern-day Switzerland was part of the territory of the kings of the Burgundians. The Alemanni settled the Swiss plateau in the 5th century, and the valleys of the Alps in the 8th century, forming Alemannia. Modern-day Switzerland was therefore then divided between the kingdoms of Alemannia and Burgundy. The entire region became part of the expanding Frankish Empire in the 6th century. Following Clovis's victory over the Alemanni at Tolbiac in 504 AD, and later Frankish domination of the Burgundians, throughout the rest of the 6th, 7th, and 8th centuries the Swiss regions continued under Frankish hegemony. But after its extension under Charlemagne, the Frankish Empire was divided. By the Treaty of Verdun in 843, the territories of present-day Switzerland became divided into Middle Francia and East Francia until they were reunified under the Holy Roman Empire around 1000 AD. By 1200, the Swiss plateau comprised the dominions of the houses of Savoy, Zähringen, Habsburg, and Kyburg. Some regions were accorded the imperial immediacy to grant the empire direct control over the mountain passes. With the extinction of its male line in 1263, the Kyburg dynasty fell in AD 1264. Then the Habsburgs under King Rudolf I laid claim to the Kyburg lands and annexed them, extending their territory to the eastern Swiss plateau. Old Swiss Confederacy. The Old Swiss Confederacy was an alliance among the valley communities of the Central Alps. The Confederacy facilitated management of common interests and ensured peace on the important mountain trade routes. The Federal Charter of 1291 agreed between the rural communes of Uri, Schwyz, and Unterwalden is considered the Confederacy's founding document, even though similar alliances are likely to have existed decades earlier. By 1353, the three original cantons had joined with the cantons of Glarus and Zug in the Lucerne, Zurich, and Bern city-states to form the Old Confederacy of 8 states that existed until the end of the 15th century. The expansion led to increased power and wealth for the Confederation. By 1460, the Confederates controlled most of the territory south and west of the Rhine to the Alps and the Jura Mountains, particularly after victories against the Habsburgs over Charles the Bold of Burgundy during the 1470s, and the success of the Swiss mercenaries. The Swiss victory in the Swabian War against the Swabian League of Emperor Maximilian I in 1499 amounted to de facto independence within the Holy Roman Empire. The Old Swiss Confederacy had acquired a reputation of invincibility during these earlier wars. But expansion of the Confederation suffered a setback in 1515, with the Swiss defeat in the Battle of Marignano. This ended the so-called heroic epoch of Swiss history. The success of Swinglish Reformation in some cantons led to intercantonal religious conflicts in 1529 and 1531. It was not until more than 100 years after these internal wars that, in 1648, under the Peace of Westphalia, European countries recognized Switzerland's independence from the Holy Roman Empire and its neutrality. During the early modern period of Swiss history, the growing authoritarianism of the patriciate families combined with a financial crisis in the wake of the 30 Years' War led to the Swiss Peasant War of 1653. In the background to this struggle, the conflict between Catholic and Protestant cantons persisted, erupting in further violence at the First War of Illmergen in 1656, and the Toggenburg War in 1712. Napoleonic era. In 1798, the revolutionary French government conquered Switzerland and imposed a new unified constitution. This centralized the government of the country, effectively abolishing the cantons. Moreover, Mulhausen joined France and Valtellina Valley, the Cisalpine Republic, separating from Switzerland. The new regime, known as the Helvetic Republic, was highly unpopular. It had been imposed by a foreign invading army and destroyed centuries of tradition, making Switzerland nothing more than a French satellite state. The fierce French suppression of the Nidwalden revolt in September 1798 was an example of the oppressive presence of the French army in the local population's resistance to the occupation. When war broke out between France and its rivals, Russian and Austrian forces invaded Switzerland. The Swiss refused to fight alongside the French in the name of the Helvetic Republic. In 1803, Napoleon organized a meeting of the leading Swiss politicians from both sides in Paris. The result was the Act of Mediation, which largely restored Swiss autonomy and introduced a confederation of 19 cantons. Henceforth, much of Swiss politics would concern balancing the cantons' tradition of self-rule with the need for a central government. In 1815, the Congress of Vienna fully re-established Swiss independence, and the European powers agreed to permanently recognize Swiss neutrality. Swiss troops still served foreign governments until 1860, when they fought in the Siege of Gaeta. The treaty also allowed Switzerland to increase its territory, with the admission of the cantons of Valais, Neuchâtel and Geneva. Switzerland's borders have not changed since, except for some minor adjustments. Federal state. The restoration of power to the patriciate was only temporary, after a period of unrest, with repeated violent clashes such as the Zürich Putsch of 1839. Civil war broke out in 1847, when some Catholic cantons tried to set up a separate alliance. The war lasted for less than a month, causing fewer than 100 casualties, most of which were through friendly fire. Yet however minor the Sonderbundskrieg appears compared with other European riots and wars in the 19th century, it nevertheless had a major impact on both the psychology and the society of the Swiss and of Switzerland. The war convinced most Swiss of the need for unity and strength towards its European neighbors. Swiss people from all strata of society, whether Catholic or Protestant, from the liberal or conservative current, realized that the cantons would profit more if their economic and religious interests were merged. Thus, while the rest of Europe saw revolutionary uprisings, the Swiss drew up a constitution which provided for a federal layout, much of it inspired by the American example. This constitution provided for a central authority while leaving the cantons the right to self-government on local issues, giving credit to those who favored the power of the cantons. The National Assembly was divided between an upper house and a lower house. Referendums were made mandatory for any amendment of this constitution. A system of single weights and measures was introduced, and in 1850 the Swiss franc became the Swiss single currency. Article 11 of the Constitution forbade sending troops to serve abroad, though the Swiss were still obliged to serve Francis II of the Two Sicilies, with Swiss guards present at the Siege of Gaeta in 1860, marking the end of foreign service. An important clause of the Constitution was that it could be rewritten completely if this was deemed necessary, thus enabling it to evolve as a whole rather than being modified one amendment at a time. This need soon proved itself when the rise in population and the Industrial Revolution that followed led to calls to modify the Constitution accordingly. An early draft was rejected by the population in 1872, but modifications led to its acceptance in 1874. It introduced the facultative referendum for laws at the federal level. It also established federal responsibility for defense, trade, and legal matters. In 1891, the Constitution was revised, with unusually strong elements of direct democracy, which remain unique even today. Modern history. Switzerland was not invaded during either of the World Wars. During World War I, Switzerland was home to Vladimir Ilyich Ulyanov, and he remained there until 1917. Swiss neutrality was seriously questioned by the Grimm-Hoffmann affair in 1917, but it was short-lived. In 1920, Switzerland joined the League of Nations, which was based in Geneva, on condition that it was exempt from any military requirements. During World War II, detailed invasion plans were drawn up by the Germans, but Switzerland was never attacked. Switzerland was able to remain independent through a combination of military deterrence, concessions to Germany, and good fortune as larger events during the war delayed an invasion. Under General Henry Gison's central command, a general mobilization of the armed forces was ordered. The Swiss military strategy was changed from one of static defense at the borders to protect the economic heartland, to one of organized long-term attrition and withdrawal to strong, well-stockpiled positions high in the Alps known as the Redouille. Switzerland was an important base for espionage by both sides in the conflict, and often mediated communications between the Axis and Allied powers. Switzerland's trade was blockaded by both the Allies and by the Axis. Economic cooperation and extension of credit to the Third Reich varied according to the perceived likelihood of invasion and the availability of other trading partners. Concessions reached a peak after a crucial rail link through Vichy France was severed in 1942, leaving Switzerland completely surrounded by the Axis. Over the course of the war, Switzerland interned over 300,000 refugees, and the International Red Cross based in Geneva played an important part during the conflict. Strict immigration and asylum policies, as well as the financial relationships with Nazi Germany, raised controversy, but not until the end of the 20th century. During the war, the Swiss Air Force engaged aircraft of both sides, shooting down 11 intruding Luftwaffe planes in May and June 1940, then forcing down other intruders after a change of policy following threats from Germany. Over 100 Allied bombers and their crews were interned during the war. During 1944–45, Allied bombers mistakenly bombed a few places in Switzerland, among which were the cities of Schaffhausen, Basel and Zürich. After the war, the Swiss government exported credits through the charitable fund known as the Schweizer Spend, and also donated to the Marshall Plan to help Europe's recovery, efforts that ultimately benefited the Swiss economy. During the Cold War, Swiss authorities considered the construction of a Swiss nuclear bomb. Leading nuclear physicists at the Federal Institute of Technology Zurich, such as Paul Scherrer, made this a realistic possibility. In 1988, the Paul Scherrer Institute was founded in his name to explore the therapeutic uses of neutron scattering technologies. Financial problems with the defense budget and ethical considerations prevented the substantial funds from being allocated, and the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty of 1968 was seen as a valid alternative. All remaining plans for building nuclear weapons were dropped by 1988. Switzerland was the last Western republic to grant women the right to vote. Some Swiss cantons approved this in 1959, while at the federal level it was achieved in 1971 and, after resistance, in the last canton Appenzell-Innerrhoden in 1990. After obtaining suffrage at the federal level, women quickly rose in political significance, with the first woman on the 7-member Federal Council executive being Elizabeth Kopp, who served from 1984–1989, and the first female president being Ruth Dreyfus in 1999. Switzerland joined the Council of Europe in 1963. In 1979, areas from the canton of Bern attained independence from the Bernese, forming the new canton of Jura. On 18 April 1999, the Swiss population and the cantons voted in favor of a completely revised federal constitution. In 2002, Switzerland became a full member of the United Nations, leaving the Vatican City as the last widely recognized state without full UN membership. Switzerland is a founding member of the EFTA, but is not a member of the European Economic Area. An application for membership in the European Union was sent in May 1992, but not advanced, since the EEA was rejected in December 1992 when Switzerland was the only country to launch a referendum on the EEA. There have since been several referendums on the EU issue. Due to a mixed reaction from the population, the membership application has been frozen. Nonetheless, Swiss law is gradually being adjusted to conform with that of the EU, and the government has signed a number of bilateral agreements with the European Union. Switzerland, together with Liechtenstein, has been completely surrounded by the EU since Austria's entry in 1995. On 5 June 2005, Swiss voters agreed by a 55% majority to join the Schengen Treaty, a result that was regarded by EU commentators as a sign of support by Switzerland, a country that is traditionally perceived as independent and reluctant to enter supranational bodies. Geography. Extending across the north and south side of the Alps in west-central Europe, Switzerland encompasses a great diversity of landscapes and climates on a limited area of. The population is about 8 million, resulting in an average population density of around 195 people per square kilometre. The more mountainous southern half of the country is far more sparsely populated than the northern half. In the largest canton of Graubünden, lying entirely in the Alps, population density falls to 27 per square kilometers. Switzerland lies between latitudes 45 degrees and 48 degrees north, and longitudes 5 degrees and 11 degrees east. It contains three basic topographical areas: the Swiss Alps to the south, the Swiss Plateau, a central plateau, and the Jura Mountains on the west. The Alps are a high mountain range running across the central south of the country, comprising about 60% of the country's total area. The majority of the Swiss population live in the Swiss Plateau. Among the high valleys of the Swiss Alps, many glaciers are found, totaling an area of. From these originate the headwaters of several major rivers, such as the Rhine, in Ticino, and Rhone, which flow in the four cardinal directions into the whole of Europe. The hydrographic network includes several of the largest bodies of freshwater in Central and Western Europe, among which are included Lake Geneva, Lake Constance and Lake Maggiore. Switzerland has more than 1,500 lakes, and contains 6% of Europe's stock of freshwater. Lakes and glaciers cover about 6% of the national territory. The largest lake is Lake Geneva, in western Switzerland, shared with France. The Rhone is both the main source and outflow of Lake Geneva. Lake Constance is the second largest Swiss lake and, like the Lake Geneva, an intermediate step by the Rhine at the border to Austria and Germany, while the Rhone flows into the Mediterranean Sea at the French Camargue region, and the Rhine flows into the North Sea at Rotterdam in the Netherlands, about apart. Both springs are only about apart from each other in the Swiss Alps. 48 of Switzerland's mountains are above sea in altitude or higher, at Monte Rosa is the highest, although the Matterhorn is often regarded as the most famous. Both are located within the Pennine Alps in the canton of Valais, on the border with Italy. The section of the Bernese Alps above the deep glacial Lauterbrunnen Valley, containing 72 waterfalls, is well known for the Jungfrau Eigerin monk, and the many picturesque valleys in the region. In the southeast, the long Engadin Valley, encompassing the St. Moritz area in canton of Graubünden, is also well known. The highest peak in the neighboring Bernina Alps is Piz Bernina. The more populous northern part of the country, comprising about 30% of the country's total area, is called the Swiss Plateau. It has greater open and hilly landscapes, partly forested, partly open pastures, usually with grazing herds, or vegetables and fruit fields. But it is still hilly. There are large lakes found here, and the biggest Swiss cities are in this area of the country. Climate. The Swiss climate is generally temperate, but can vary greatly between the localities. From glacial conditions on the mountaintops to the often pleasant near-Mediterranean climate at Switzerland's southern tip, there are some valley areas in the southern part of Switzerland, where some cold hardy palm trees are found. Summers tend to be warm and humid at times, with periodic rainfall, so they are ideal for pastures and grazing. The less humid winters in the mountains may see long intervals of stable conditions for weeks, while the lower lands tend to suffer from inversion during these periods, thus seeing no sun for weeks. A weather phenomenon known as the fond can occur at all times of the year, and is characterized by an unexpectedly warm wind, bringing air of very low relative humidity to the north of the Alps during rainfall periods on the southern face of the Alps. This works both ways across the Alps, but is more efficient if blowing from the south due to the steeper step for oncoming wind from the south. Valleys running south to north trigger the best effect. The driest conditions persist in all inner alpine valleys that receive less rain, because arriving clouds lose a lot of their content while crossing the mountains before reaching these areas. Large alpine areas such as Graubünden remain drier than pre-alpine areas, and as in the main valley of the Valais, wine grapes are grown there. The wettest conditions persist in the high Alps, and in the Ticino canton, which has much sun yet heavy bursts of rain from time to time. Precipitation tends to be spread moderately throughout the year, with a peak in summer. Autumn is the driest season, winter receives less precipitation than summer. Yet the weather patterns in Switzerland are not in a stable climate system and can be variable from year to year with no strict and predictable periods. Thank you for watching. Brought to you by WikiVD Documentaries. Please like and subscribe below. Please like and subscribe below.